All right, so let's talk about practical content execution and consistency. Now, in previous modules, I think it was when we talked about content strategy and planning, same module 4, right? We talked about how to batch create content for effectiveness and for consistency purpose as well. Now, beyond batch creating content, let's practically talk about what consistency in creating content, what that looks like, what that means, and how to be able to navigate, real life constraints that can impede or affect your consistency when it comes to creating content. Now, some of the things that I'm going to be sharing here are things that have worked practically for me, and I trust that it's good for you as well. Because you see, having the desire to want to create content consistently goes beyond just, you know, goes beyond that, right? It will require you to push yourself. And this is why I always find it funny when people do not take, or when people think that content creation is not a full time job. I feel like someone who dedicates their time to create content consistently should be given the same level of respect as any other job, because it takes time, it takes emotional strength. Sometimes it requires your mental resilience, because you would have to push past whatever challenges you are currently facing to just get what you need to get done, right? And that is what this model is just going to be lightly touching on, how to stay consistent, and just share some practical reality that comes with, creating content, becoming a content creator, in terms of, in line with all of the things that you've been watching since the beginning of this course. So, what consistency really means? What does consistency really means, right? Right? A lot of times, people might want to, you know, um, overwhelm themselves with what they think a concept means. I'm saying this because every time we tell people stay consistent, be consistent, what these people think is, oh, every single day I have to be showing up. Well, that is a form of consistency. That depends on, you know, what you are able to do and what you're able to achieve. Remember, we're talking about practical, right? Content execution in line with reality. So someone's reality may be different from yours. So you may see someone, being able to post every single day. It is because they've created a system that works for them. So it really boils down to you, it boils down to your system. And then we also want to talk about consistency. We now need to also factor in the why, right? So if consistency for you is about posting every single day, why are you posting every single day? And answering that to a large extent will give purpose to why you're doing this. But generally, we give some sense of purpose to why you're posting every day. But generally, right, the whole idea of when we tell people to be consistent is to ensure that people, you know, because it's to ensure that you realize that it's to realize that if you want to build you know um a good career in content creation, or you want to have results, then there has to be some level of consistency to anything you're doing. That is why we tell people, oh, stay consistent. Beyond that, it's also about being better at your craft, right? You cannot get better at something that you do occasionally. I tell people that choose consistency over occasional intensity. There are some people, you see them, they are very energetic and they want to be like, oh, I want to create content right now. And then the next thing, after 2 weeks, that energy is no longer there. So, what happens when the energy is no longer there? That is what we want to deal with, and that is what we want to talk about when we're touching on a subject matter like consistency, right? So, first of all, consistency is not about posting every single day. right? You can post every single day, you can create every single day, but that is not what consistency. When we say consistency, that shouldn't be the only thing that comes to mind. It's consistency is more about showing up intentionally, right? The key word here is intentionally, deliberately. You are being mindful about how you are showing up because that is the key, right? So you're not being random, you're not being scattered, right? So consistency is about showing up intentionally and predictably, another keyword. So your audience understands your voice, your message, and your value. There's something I said in the previous model. I said that there's a way you can approach content creation, your storytelling in your own unique manner that people begin to attach that entire process to your face, to your name, and to your brand, right? So part of the things that consistency helps us to do is that it helps us to be able to really understand your voice because what repetition has a way of leaving a mark, right? Leaving an indelible mark. Now, when people see something over and over and over again, that is how the power of branding. That's where the power of branding comes in. That's where you see that there are some people that have strong personal brands. Why? Because over the years they've been so consistent and they've showed up in a way that makes it easy for people to attach, oh, this is Ajiri Okoribe's voice, or this is Ajiri Okoribe's content. You know, you can actually be that deliberate to ensure that people associate you with certain things. But it will not happen if you're not consistently showing up as that thing. And it will not happen if you don't consistently be you don't consistently be you do not happen if you're not constantly at the faces of people with that particular thing that you want, to be associated with. So consistency helps you show up with clarity. It helps you keep promises to your audience. It helps maintain message alignment. And I think this is for me is one of the most important things what I've been emphasizing. It helps build familiarity over time. Now, why does consistency matter, right? So when you show up consistently, you position yourself as reliable. Now, reliability turns creators into authorities, right? So when you show up consistently, you are positioning yourself as reliable. You are also letting people know that people need to take you seriously, right? Or that you are showing people the intentionality behind what you're doing. So that is how people become authorities in their niche because they're consistent. Mm-hmm. Oh, they're consistent and all of that. And so that is basically the whole idea to build audience trust, strengthen brand positioning, increase visibility over time, create momentum that compounds, open doors to opportunity. Now, I'm just going to talk about the point create momentum that compounds and why it is important. A lot of people are probably, you know, aiming at virality as a strategy when it comes to, them creating content, when it comes to them, you know, putting themselves out. They want to, everybody hopes to go viral at something and all that, right? But the truth is, if you have to choose between virality and, you know, if you have to choose between virality and momentum that compounds, that is daily output that compounds, I would advise you to always choose momentum that compounds. Not because virality is not good, but people can go viral, but the algorithm can pick up your content for all the wrong reasons, for all the funny reasons. It's the content that you might even think that should not perform best that the algorithm can pick on a particular day. But imagine you going viral and people come to your page. Now that you're viral and they are looking at your page, they're like, oh, okay, what else is about this person? So if all you're just doing is, oh, I want to put my all in a particular content with the hope of it going viral without actually, paying attention to consistently putting that level of work to every content you are putting out, then what happens is that even when you go viral, people might come to your page or might find you through that viral video, but you've not been able to build momentum over time and then or put out content over time, or you've not been intentional about how you are showing up. So what happens is that the virality just happens and then it just disappears. So always the whole idea of consistency is that every day you're showing up like this is the day I will go viral. Now I will not ideally advise people to have that mindset, but I'm just saying for people who might, you know, for people who that drives them, right? Or the better way I would say is that every day just show up like you have all the numbers in the world, edit your video, you know, put in the best, or how would I put it? Just show up like you have all the followers already, you know, and be able to. So when you have that in the back of your mind, what happens is that you begin to have some of these things that we're already talking about. So inconsistent creators stay invisible, consistent creators grow, right? So that's just something you need to know, that the more consistent you are, the more you increase your chances of being visible and being able to, you know, get the kind of results that you are looking for. Now, how to build consistency. The first thing you need to do when it comes to building consistency is first of all create consistency systems. Now, a consistency system reduces daily decision fatigue and increases execution. I need to be honest with you that sometimes content creation messes with your mental health, and that sometimes that the thought of creating the content itself takes you out of the game before you even start to create the content. And that is because content creation to a large extent would involve us bypassing some of the things that we're probably not confident about with ourselves, especially if you are creating content with your personal brand. Some of us might have genuine fears like, oh, I don't think I'm fine enough. Oh, I don't think I'm pretty enough. Um, and so there are days you may wake up and you're like, I don't feel beautiful enough today to create content. Those times will come. So building a consistency system reduces daily decision, right? So you are no longer working with your emotions anymore, but you are just setting things in place to ensure that you are preparing even for those days. So what a consistency system might look like is you creating a content calendar, especially if you're working with a brand, obviously. Creating a content calendar, defining clear content pillars, batch producing in advance, assign specific creation days, schedule before the week begins, right? And I also wrote here that systems create stability. Now, in the previous modules, we talked extensively about how to batch create content. So, as much as possible, I will not need to mention it here because you've watched it already. But I just want to talk about how important this is, how important it is to set up consistency systems, right? When you're able to set up consistency systems, you are no longer telling yourself that or you're no longer just you're no longer, the word would be wishful thinking, right? You're no longer just saying, oh, I want to create content as 100 times or show up this, show up that. There's some people, especially this year, who started, you know, content challenges. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of us must have seen that. Day one of, day two of, day three of. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us may have seen that day three, day four, day five, day six of. I'm here to tell you right now that before those people started putting out that challenge, they've already set up systems in place. For those who did not set up systems in place to be able to on how to show up, chances are at some point during the challenge, they started showing up. You could see the quality of that challenge dwindle, and or they left the challenge because there was no consistency system in place. So, for instance, I started this year to say that, you know what, I'm so very engrossed with building other brands, working for my clients or even for working full time for people that I work with. And a lot of times I do not show up on my page as I want to. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to show up every single day. But for me, my goal was I just want to ensure that things like I just want to ensure that my personal page was more about sharing snippet of thoughts, nothing too complicated, right? And for me to even just be able to show up every day, I had to make sure that I had, certain things in place. I had either prepared a video ahead or a picture I wanted to use for the next day or a write up or something. The idea is I just wanted to ensure that something was going out because it's going to be a build up for, a strategic um, content strategy that I'll be putting in place for myself. But the first part of it was that, okay, just show up every day, first of all. It doesn't have to be grand, it doesn't even have to be anything fancy. Just be able to put out content consistently. That way, I would have mastered the momentum to be able to now easily dive into the strategic content strategy that the strategic content process that I'll be putting in place later, right? So that at least I would have mastered how to show up consistently before I bring in the next phase or the next step, right? That I think would be ideal for my personal page to grow exponentially. And so for me to do that, and this is just like I said, the goal was just to ensure put something out. I know what that looks like. Not talk of when you are like all in and you're like, oh more every content that I put out has to have a goal attached to it. Maybe sales, maybe ensuring that people reach out to me. Trust me, you cannot survive without a consistency system, right? So even if you say, oh, your consistency is not posting consistently for you is not every day, even if it's just for this in a week, trust me, it might sound easy, but eventually as time goes on, your energy, your interest level will begin to run out, and it is the consistency system that you have put in place that can step in. The next thing is to set a minimum standard, right? Your minimum standard is your baseline commitment. So it must be realistic enough to sustain during busy weeks. So how to build consistency would be like, you know what? I'm going to make sure I put 3 posts per week, 2 short videos weekly, one long form post weekly. So you're just trying to say, oh, I'm setting up a minimum standard for myself. I'm going to I'm going to outline things that I consider the barest minimum so that even if the worst happens, I have to ensure that at so time this has gone out, that has gone out, this has gone out, right? So for example, 3 posts per week, 2 short videos weekly, one long form post weekly. So that's about 6 posts that is going out. And you're intentional about saying out of that 6 posts, 3 posts would be a probably a graphic, 2 short videos, and maybe one. Yeah, you see how intentional you're being, just so that there's a bit of structure to what you are doing. So your minimum is your non-negotiable. So it is more like worst, no matter what happens, I should be able to post one content in a week. I mean, that's going to be slow growth for you, but if you do that consistently, trust me, you would have been able to you would eventually, right? Showing up every day will not be hard because consistency is first a mindset. It's first commitment to what you said you would do long after the feeling um, when you said it, it's no longer, it's no longer there. So it is more about a mindset thing. So if you show up once a week, you can start easing into showing up 2 times a week. And before you know, you've hacked a system that probably works for you, right? Then the next thing will be, tracking your consistency. So what gets measured gets improved ultimately, right? So tracking helps you move from guessing to optimizing. So when you're able to decide a consistency pace for yourself, you can now decide to say, okay, I need to start monitoring my posting frequency, observing engagement trends. Now you now need to track your consistency against what is actually working. Is my consist is my is does this work? You need to be able to say, how I'm showing up. Does it work with the kind of results that I want? Does this ultimately align with the results that I'm looking forward to having? Right? Then you now also need to check how are you performing right now with where you are at, with the way you are showing up, and we've already talked about analytics already. How are you going to ensure that it is effectively, because again, we are taking content creation seriously, right? So whether you're doing this for a brand, whether you're doing this for yourself, tracking your consistency is very important, or tracking how you're how or tracking just how you are showing up is helping you achieve the results that you need, right? Then another thing, way to another tip for building consistency, or how to build consistency, is putting discipline in place, right? Right. You have to prepare for low energy days, because like I said, content creation is going to mess your mental health. I'm being practical. Even if your job is just editing content for other people, it comes with, yeah, it will tap into your creativity. And a lot of times when you spend so much time doing mental work, it begins to affect you, right? So prepare for low energy days, for days when you're not always all high. So for those days, what you can do is keep draft captions saved. You don't always have to wait till you want to create content to create content. You can just create content on your high energy days. Be able to scribble down things as often as you can. Once an idea comes, don't wait till when you are ready to be able to document those ideas, right? Create reusable templates. If you're someone working with a client, maybe as a social media manager, be able to create editable design templates that will help you showing up for that client easy, right? Maintain evergreen content. So the whole idea is just do things that help you, so that even when you're on your low energy, what can you do today that can probably help your goal that you have set for the next week? All those things are things that will help. So imagine if you're not writing enough, you're not scribbling, you're not storing content ideas. When you now have high energy and you're ready to go, what happens basically is that you become he prepared, the process now becomes unnecessarily long. So those are things that you might want to pay attention to. All right, so creating content under real life constraints. Um, so content creation in real life, right? So let's talk about creating content under real life constraints. And I already talked about how that content creation can really mess you up if you don't have systems in place. But another thing a lot of people don't talk about, or people talk about but they don't admit, right? And that's why when people tell me things like, "Oh my God, I can't create content because of this, because of that," I can definitely relate, because sometimes real life happens to people. There's so many factors that can come in the way that can affect you from creating content consistently, right? So some of those things might look like you don't have a perfect environment, right? A lot of creators do not actually have perfect environments when they are starting out. They are building their brands while managing work or school, family commitments, limited equipment, and limited time. So I can imagine, I understand what it looks like trying to be a content creator, either a content creator that does it for the personal brand, or a content creator that creates for other brands. Sometimes, yeah, trying to do all of that while managing work or school life, while trying to deal with family commitment. I know someone who always tells me that it's so sad every time she wants to delve into content creation. The moment she's setting up, that is when her parents want her to do something in the house, and it can be really messed up, because again, we live our parents sometimes may not understand what we're trying to delve into. So these are real life constraints, and it's so important that we are able to acknowledge this, even though we're trying to build a consistency track for ourselves, right? Being able to pause and say, "Oh, this is my reality right now. I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with that. So, how am I able to bypass this to still be able to show up? content creation in real life requires adaptability. It means it might mean for you that you may need to choose simple ways to show up because of the other competing because of the other competing situations that you may have in your life, right? So it requires adaptability, using available tools, prioritizing execution over perfection. So when you know that you have so many things you're having to deal with, and you still need to show up, trust me, your whole obsession about that's to be perfect would have to be thrown out of the window because you need to because now you are honest with yourself to know that there's so much right now. Probably you're a single mom, you have to deal with children, while dealing with school, while dealing with family, while dealing with for someone like that, trust me, the most important thing for them is am I be able to tell my story well? Am I able to put out myself there without having to think about perfection? And that is why I'm so grateful for TikTok. TikTok has been able to remove that whole, oh, everything has to be aesthetically pleasing. It has been able to a large extent, remove that barrier. And so that is something that is helpful because I know that before now, everybody was crazy about the aesthetics. They cared more about, oh, how my video looks. But go to TikTok. You can literally do anything in anywhere, right? And so it's important for you to bear this in mind that content creation would affect other parts of your life or would demand that you share yourself from other parts of your life with this as well. So you need to be able to adapt and you need to stop thinking perfection but start thinking about execution, right? So there's something called excellent execution. You can be excellent without overly being obsessed about the perfection of it, right? Oh, I need to have this in place. My hair needs to be in. No, no, no. Don't create more problems for yourself. Another thing way to navigate, creating content over under real life constraints is repurpose intentionally. So instead of creating from scratch daily, maximize what you already have. So what that means is that you can be able to repost even something you posted before again and again. Like you can take up the content that you posted last year and decide to bring it again. You can turn a video into a carousel. What is a carousel, right? Slide, all of the slides that we see on Instagram. I think I must have been able to, share on this in the previous model. Right. Turn a video into a carousel. You can break long content into clips. So there are some people who are just very good at just talking for straight hours. Like they love creating long content. So for someone like you now, you can start to just talk at a stretch on a particular topic that has subtopics under it. Talk at stretch and be able to break that into short clips, right? And then another thing you can do is repurpose content across platforms, right? You can be able to tweak the different content. You can be able to tweak content to you can take content from Instagram, you post it on TikTok, right? So that way you're just being able to maximize what you already have. You can go back to your drafts, right? And see how you can tweak things here and there. Those are the ways that you can, maximize what you already have. Such that, even in times when you really don't really have much, you can be able to say, okay, I can pull from here to still put out something that particular season or that particular time. So another thing is reduce production pressure. This way I was talking about trying to be overly perfect with how you post, how you show up, right? And I did not say be less excellent. I'm just saying that you need to be able to focus on delivering value, right? Keep editing minimal when needed. It's not every video that you put out that must have all of the dramatic editing or advanced transitions that may have all I don't know. You're not trying to produce a movie in a single content. So you don't need to have all of the cinematic angles. Now, are those good? Yes, but as much as possible, when it comes to, remember we're talking about content creation, how to fix, your consistency level in content creation when you have so many things that you have to deal with. Always try to see how to reduce the production process. Always try to see how to streamline your process into 1 to 2 steps, or 1 to 3 steps that can help you be able to, put out content eventually. So focusing on delivering value, keeping editing, prioritizing message over aesthetics, right? Your aesthetics might be amazing, but if what you're saying doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Then maintain execution reading, right? So yeah, this is practically what life would look like when you are trying to fight through, the reality of every day. We are human beings, and there's so many things that compete for our attention. And it's easy to just throw content creation to the silence as like this is more important. But remember, if you want to take this seriously, then you have to be able to add it as one of your as part of your priority as well. And so that is the whole idea of this model. Just showing you or demystifying what consistency looks like, right? So it doesn't have to be every day. However, it just has to be, um, you just have to find what works for you and sticking to that in such a way that you are able to follow through. And then being able to, track what how you're showing up, if that is helping you to achieve your goal, because eventually your goal is important, right? Just about how to build consistency, setting up systems, set a minimum standard, tracking your consistency, prepare for low energy days, and generally speaking about how to create content under real life constraints, because this is a reality that would happen. These are, what if your phone gets broken? What if your lights gets broken? Wouldn't you use the sun? Wouldn't you open your window to use natural light? These are things like try as much as possible to not make use, to not allow excuses, however genuine that they may be, to stop you from achieving your goal. It can be frustrating. In fact, that's the whole idea of this model, to tell you that it's going to be frustrating a lot of times. But being able to just put your feet down and being able to, you know, um, create systems or put things in place or find alternatives that still help you. Remember, consistency over perfection, that helps you stay consistent, or that would help you show up, is most important, especially if you want to do this long term and you're building, for you're building this as a sustainable path for yourself. So yes, that would be all. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this session. As always, feel free to drop your questions on the group if you have further questions.